When was the last time your buyer was actually in the room when you made a decision about them? Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Jasmine. This podcast exists because that question matters more than most marketing teams realize. Let's get into it.
Hey, Jasmine.
Hello, Matt. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. And today we're talking about stage gates,
Indeed.
specifically why the process most life science companies use to decide whether a product should move forward is structurally designed to produce optimism rather than evidence. Not because the people running it are doing anything wrong, but because the incentives, the templates, and the culture around the gate reviews building a strong case rather than testing whether the case is true. Now, this might sound like it matters more than it sounds. The commercial decisions made at stage gates, whether to proceed, whether to fund the next phase, whether to commit the team, are some of the highest stakes calls in life science product development. Get them wrong consistently, and you're not just losing individual programs, you are building a portfolio on foundations that were never properly tested. Now, you've just written a blog on this, and I found it pretty uncomfortable to read. Your argument is that the gate process is working exactly as designed. It just might be designed to answer the wrong question. I want to dig into this because if this is right, the fix isn't about a better template, it's about having a different conversation. Is that a fair reading of what you're arguing?
Yeah, it sure is. And the reason it matters is that the system is working as designed. A gate process that asks product managers to build a business case will produce product managers who are expert at building those types of cases. That's not the same as being good at testing whether the product should exist. A skilled PM knows which numbers the committee will accept and how to frame the competition in a way that doesn't invite hard questions. None of that tells you whether the market will buy the product.
Isn't the committee supposed to catch that? Isn't that the whole point of having a stage gate process?
Yes, but the committee can only probe what's in the room and what's being discussed. A skilled PM controls what's in the room, and the things most likely to kill the program are exactly the things most likely to be absent from the deck. At least that's been my experience both as a product manager and on the committee. A capital instrument program that should have been stopped early consumes two, maybe sometimes $4 million in development spend before the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. And the gate didn't fail because it lacked data. It just asked the wrong question.
So your suggestion is to design the gate around proving yourself wrong rather than proving yourself right?
Exactly. It's that falsification shift, not what supports this argument, but instead what would kill this argument, and have we seriously tested it? Your R&D colleagues already operate this way, and a scientist doesn't just show the experiments that worked, they show the ones that failed, because the boundary conditions tell you a lot. Those limits of what the data can claim are invaluable. And the commercial gate should hold itself to exactly the same standard.
So in other words, what some people might call a stage gate pre-mortem?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. So your framework treats two types of claims very differently. You have technical claims that have to be tested against reality, and then revenue forecasts that just have to show they're working. Is that a bit of a generous standard for the number that matters most to the committee, which is always the money?
Yeah, the alternative is worse. Demand the same standard from a revenue forecast as from a lab result, and you've created a process that kills almost every early stage program worth running. Nobody can run a controlled experiment on a market that doesn't exist yet. The standard I'm describing is not about how the document looks, it's about whether the committee can see the reasoning behind the number. Where did the revenue figure come from? Which specific customer is it based on? How many labs is it based on? What would have to be true for that projection to work? If a PM can't answer those three questions in the room, the forecast fails regardless of how confident the presentation sounds.
Doesn't that assume the committee will push on those questions? All too often, the teams we've worked with who have had programs miss their launch targets by 50, 60%, those committees are experienced too. Experience doesn't immunize a committee against a well constructed case. Is that true?
It is, which is why the standard has to be built into the template, not left to the judgment of whoever's in the room on that day. If the gate can't proceed without a written answer to those three questions, the committee has something concrete to interrogate. It doesn't replace their judgment, it gives their judgment something to work on.
But if I document everything that could go wrong and bring it to the stage gate meeting, I've handed the committee a list of reasons to say no. The product manager who stays quiet about the risks walks out with approval, and I've been transparent about the risks and my projects get killed.
But that's fair enough. That is a real risk, and I want to be honest about it. You can present failure cases carefully. Here's what we found. Here's why it doesn't affect our target use case. Here's what would actually stop this program. That gives the committee something precise to engage with rather than a reason to panic. But if the committee is still determined to treat evidence of careful testing as a sign the program's too risky, the framework alone will not save the product manager or the project.
So that sort of speaks to the fact that really we need to work on maybe a bigger fix and fixing the culture problem first.
Yeah, it works better inside those organizations. It also surfaces the culture problem faster in the ones that haven't, which is its own kind of value. But yes, I'm not going to pretend that changing what goes in the gate path fixes a committee that rewards optimism. It doesn't. I mean, we know that a typical stage gate process has the last stage post launch, which is a debrief. And that debrief sure could happen right after the project closes, but typically also happens a couple of years later to assess how accurate the business case was, how well forecasted was year one of the launch and year two of the launch. So, one way or another, this kind of discussion does need to surface.
You also recommend that running one target experiment before the feasibility gate. But teams raising this objection are often at the point where the feasibility gate is how they make the case for resources in the first place. They're asking for budget to do the work you were describing before they have the budget to do any work. How do we square that circle?
Yeah. The experiment I'm describing isn't a full validation study. It's one targeted test at the conditions most likely to break the technology. So, a day of bench time, not a full on program. If a team genuinely can't find a day of bench time before a gate that's asking for $2 to $4 million in development commitment, that's a prioritization problem, not a resource problem.
Fair. I mean, it does assume the R&D team agrees it's worth running. And even if the resources exist, convincing an R&D team to run a test designed to break something they believe in, isn't that a hard conversation for a PM to have?
Can be. And the resistance itself can be a signal as well. A scientist who can't quickly name the conditions under which their approach would fail either hasn't thought about it or has and doesn't want to say. Both are things you want to know before the gate, not after it.
Now, for the product manager listening to this who goes back to their gate template on Monday and none of those fields exist, what's their first move?
Yeah, two sentences per claim. One stating the condition under which the claim fails, and one stating what you found when you looked for that condition. You're not redesigning the template, you're populating it differently. Most gate committees accept this immediately because it makes the program easier to defend, not harder to pass.
And what about the customer research section?
So find at least one customer for whom this problem is already solved. Document what they used instead. If you can't find anyone, that's a signal worth surfacing at the gate, not after. Enthusiast quotes are confirmation. Dissenting voices are evidence.
And if somebody's looking for one question that just cuts across all of it?
Hmm. Ask your R&D partner, what did we design specifically to break this? A clean answer with data means you proceed with confidence. A pause is the most valuable signal you'll get before the gate opens. The pause tells you what the deck can't.
Thank you for digging into this for us all. I hope everybody found that useful. The full blog and a practical framework for what counts as good evidence at each stage of development, plus a helpful FAQ on what to do when your committee uses your own rigor against you, can be found at striven.com, and we'll provide the link in the show notes. If you have a gate coming up and want to work through what this looks like in your program, find Jasmine on LinkedIn or book a growth consultation at striven.com.
Great. This was super fun. Thanks, Nat.
Thank you, Jasmine. Speak soon. Thank you for listening to a splice of life science marketing. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
If this conversation helped you, the single biggest way you can support the show is to subscribe and leave a review on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it, and it makes a huge difference.
You can find out more about us and the topics we discuss at striven.com or on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you next time.